Greetings and welcome to my channel, it's UFO time. I'm gonna go back to past again to look at some of the interesting UFO cases that made headlines at the time and that are still unexplained, no matter how hard skeptics were trying to debunk them. On today's menu we have 5 UFO encounters and I hope you're gonna enjoy the stories. But before we start, recommendation for all of you who enjoy real ghost videos. The 3X is making some great stuff, so go and visit him, subscribe and like his videos. Link is in the description box. And talking of subscribing, you might as well subscribe to my channel, like videos, leave a comments, whatever you like. Okay, let's get started. The Lonnie Zamora incident was an alleged UFO sighting that occurred on April 24, 1964, near Socorro, New Mexico, when Socorro police officer Lonnie Zamora claimed he saw 2 people beside a shiny object that later rose into the air accompanied by a roaring flame. Zamora's claims were subject to attention from the news media, UFO investigators and the UFO organizations, and the US Air Force Project Blue Book listed the case as unknown. Conventional explanation of Zamora's claims include a lunar lander test by White Sand Missile Range and the hoax by New Mexico Tech students. Zamora told authorities he was pursuing a speeding car south of Socorro, New Mexico, when he heard a roar and saw a flame in the sky to southwest some distance away, possibly half a mile or a mile. Believing a local dynamite shack might have exploded, Zamora said he discounted the pursuit and investigated the potential explosion. Zamora claimed to have observed a shiny object to south about 150 to 200 yards, that he initially believed to be an overturned white car. The object was like aluminum, it was whitish against the mesa background, but not chrome, and shaped like the letter O. Zamora claimed to have briefly observed 2 people in white coveralls beside the object, who he later described as normal in shape, but possibly they were small adults or large kids. Zamora claimed to hear a roar and see a blue and orange flame under the object, which then rose and quickly moved away. Zamora's claims were investigated by governmental projects and civilian ufologists, and have been reported in the popular press and media. Although ufology groups consider the Zamora incident one of the most credible encounters on record, several alternative explanations have been presented. These included the testing of a lunar landing device by personnel from White Sands Missile Range and the prank perpetrated by students from the nearby New Mexico Tech. Regarding the latter explanation, then president of the New Mexico Tech, Sterling Colgate, supported the idea that students from the school were responsible for the hoax. At approximately 11 a.m. on Wednesday, 6 April 1966, students and teachers from Westall High School reported seeing a flying object, described as a grey saucer-shaped craft with a slight purple hue and about twice the size of a family car. According to students, the object was descending, overflew the high school and disappeared behind a stand of trees. Approximately 20 minutes later, the object reportedly reappeared, climbed at speed and departed towards the northwest. Some accounts describe the object as being pursued by 5 unidentified aircraft. Australian newspaper The Edge described it as weather balloon. An unidentified flying object seen over Clayton Moorabbin area yesterday morning might have been a weather balloon. Hundreds of children and a number of teachers at Westall School, Clayton, watched the object during morning break. The Weather Bureau released the balloon at Leverton at 8:30 a.m. and the westerly wind blowing at the time could have moved it into the area where the sightings were reported. The newspaper also said a number of small airplanes circled around it. However, a check later showed that no commercial private or Air AAF pilots are reported anything unusual in the area. According to Keith Busterfield, a runway balloon from the High Altitude Balloon Project used to monitor radiation levels after British nuclear tests, its likely explanation. Busterfield located documents in the National Archives and former Department of Supply indicating a test balloon launched from Mildura may have been blown off course and came down in Clayton South in a paddock near Westall High School, alarming and baffling hundreds of eyewitnesses, including teachers and students. Busterfield said balloons had a white silver appearance and featured a parachute and gas tube trailing from the top, which is consistent with witness descriptions of the object. There were also reports that after the incident, men in suits cautioned witnesses not to discuss details of the secret government exercise. According to skeptic Brian Dunning, the weather balloon is likely explanation for the first half of the event. Dunning added, as years have passed, descriptions of what was actually seen have now become diluted, with made-up descriptions by unknown numbers of students who didn't see anything, and there's no way to know which is which. On 23 January 1974, on the Berwyn Mountains in Wales, lights and noises were observed that were alleged to be related to UFO sightings. Scientific evidence indicated that the event was generated by an earthquake, combined with the sightings of a bright meteor widely observed over Wales and northern England at the time. On the evening of 23 January 1974, residents of Berwyn Mountains area in northern Wales reported a loud noise and a bright light in the sky. When ufologists claimed that the UFO crashed and the British government covered up the military recovery of a crashed spaceship, some tabloid newspapers jokingly labeled it as a Roswellish incident. Scientific evidence indicates that the event was generated by an earthquake combined with the sighting of a bright meteor widely observed over Wales and northern England at the time. Declassified Ministry of Defense documents also suggest that the incident was caused by the combined effects of an earthquake and a meteor. The 1976 Tehran UFO incident was a radar and visual sighting of an unidentified flying object over Tehran, the capital of Iran, during the early morning hours of 19 September 1976. During the incident, two Imperial Iranian Air Force F-4 Phantom jet interceptors reported losing instrumentation and communications as they approached the object. These were restored upon withdrawal. One of the aircraft also reported a temporary weapon system failure while the crew was preparing to open fire. An initial report of the incident was relayed to the US Joint Chief of Staff on 19 September 1976. According to US journalist Philip Klass, it was likely that pilots initially saw an astronomical body, probably Jupiter, an explanation also cited by aerospace researcher James Oberg. Klass wrote that pilot incompetence and equipment malfunction likely accounted for the reported equipment failures. According to Klass, the Westinghouse technician at Airbase stated that only the first F-4 reported failing equipment, and that this F-4 was known for equipment failures with a long history of electrical outages having been repaired only a month before the incident. Klass cited a McDonnell Douglas repair supervisor's opinion that the F-4's radar could have been in a manual track mode, causing a wrong interpretation of the radar lock. Bridgestock criticized the ufologist's report as not reliable account of the Iran UFO incident and summed up Klass conclusions. Regarding one pilot's report of bright objects that came at him and that shoot straight down into the ground, American skeptic author Brian Dunning observes that 19 September, the day of the incident, was the height of 2 annual meteorite showers. At the site where the falling lights supposedly crash, a beeping transponder from C-141 aircraft was found, according to investigating Colonel Mui. According to Dunning, once we look at all the story elements, without the presumption of an alien spaceship, the only thing unusual about the Tehran 1976 UFO case is that planes were chasing celestial objects and had equipment failures. There have been many cases where planes had equipment failures, and there have been many cases where planes misidentified celestial objects. Once in a while, both will happen at the same flight. The kaikoura lights is the name given by the New Zealand media to a series of UFO sightings that occurred in December 1978 over the skies above the Kaikoura mountain range in the northeast of New Zealand. The first sightings were made on 21st December when a crew of a Safe Air Limited cargo aircraft began observing a series of strange lights around the plane, which tracked along with their aircraft for several minutes before disappearing and then reappearing elsewhere. The UFO was very large and had 5 white flashing lights that were visible on the craft. Some people say they could see some little discs drop from the UFO and then disappear. The pilots described some of the lights to be the size of a house and others small but flashing brilliantly. These objects appear on the air traffic control radar in Wellington and also on the aircraft's onboard radar. On 30 December 1978, a television crew from Australia recorded background film for a network show of interviews about the sightings. For many minutes at a time of the flight to Christchurch, unidentified lights were observed by 5 people on the flight deck, were tracked by Wellington air traffic controllers and filmed in color by the television crew. One object reportedly followed the aircraft almost until landing. The cargo plane then took off again with the television crew still on board, heading for Birmingham. When the aircraft reached about 2,000 feet, it encountered a gigantic light orb, which fell into station of the wingtip and tracked along with the cargo plane for almost quarter of an hour, while being filmed, watched, tracked on the aircraft radar and described on a tape recording made by the TV film crew. A spate of sightings followed the initial report, and the Air Force Skyhawk was put on standby to investigate any positive sightings. Following the sightings, the Royal New Zealand Air Force, the police and the Carter Observatory in Wellington cooperated in investigation, the result of which were lodged in the National Archive in Wellington. The New Zealand Ministry of Defence attributed the sighting to lights from squid boats reflected off clouds, unburied meteors, or lights from the planet Venus or trains and cars. In December 2010, New Zealand military released a classified report on the incident under the Freedom of Information Law, which concludes the same thing. So, what do you guys think about these cases? Leave your comments, and if you know of an interesting UFO sighting or you have some scary stories, true, fictional, creepypasta, feel free to send it my way. Emails are on the screen and in the description box. Consider also subscribing to my channel for more content like this. That's all for today, stay safe and I'll see you soon.